that everything is good.
Mhm.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your plants behind you? You've got so many alive plants, which is I feel like
It's
such a
wild, isn't it? Yeah, I usually, well, up until 2 years ago, I killed them all the time, and I'm sort of starting to get the hang of it, but hit or miss. But I do enjoy them.
good, good, good.
Yeah.
I see there's a snake plant, right? Is that a snake plant behind you? Those are my favorite because those are like impossible to. You don't have to have a green thumb. You don't have to have anything. Those are like impossible
Oh
to
yeah,
kill.
yeah. I'm
Um,
stuck with easy ones. I can't do a little leaf. I can't do a
oh,
lemon tree.
they're beautiful, but I'm like, I would
No.
never be able to give it the time and attention that it needs. So we live and we learn. Awesome. We are all good. We're all live on LinkedIn and on YouTube and X now, I believe too. So we are
Awesome.
all set.
Great.
So hello everybody. Welcome to Design to Dev. This is our community interview series where we talk to folks who design and build beautiful products. Today I have with me Becky Specking. Becky, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do. We'd love to get to know you.
Yeah. Great to be here. And I'm Becky. I'm a product designer based out of Chicago. So I provide design consulting services across UX design, UI design, UX writing and content, sort of that end-to-end product experience. I am currently at my company Spec Studio exploring ethical design practices. What does that mean? And really embedding it in my own process so I can really standardize it. So that's a work in progress, but it's something I'm really excited about doing. And right now, I'm working with a couple of really great clients and projects. I do the UX writing and content for Ulta Beauty, which I've done for a few years now. And that's really helped me, I think, piece together and connect the dots across the experience because the copy is so important. I think a lot of times as designers, we don't get to influence that. And then I just started another new project with a startup called Infin, and they're doing something pretty cool. They are working to shift how employees give feedback and are valued by their companies. So instead of an annual 360 review that might be a little vague,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to action on this. This is looking at your peers' feedback and how they value you, and kind of laying that out and being transparent across the company. So that's exciting too.
Awesome. I love to see it. It's interesting too that you mentioned about UX writing specifically. I was just at front end design conference and
Mm.
one of the sessions was all about accessibility and they were like click here is possibly one of the worst like texts that you can use for anchor text because it's like click here to do what? Like what am I seeing when I
Yeah,
click here? It's not descriptive at all. So it's fantastic that, you're more involved with that too and making those processes.
totally.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're a Stigma, I'm sorry, a Harmony Award winner for the work that you did with
Nice.
Stigma too. So
Yes.
I'm excited to dive into that a little bit too later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited to get to know you more, get to know who you are as a designer specifically too. So if I could ask you, what are some of your core beliefs or experiences that have shaped you the most as a designer?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the beginning, a long time ago, I wanted to be a lawyer and specifically a human rights international lawyer. I thought I was going to, save the world, travel, work with a lot of great people and do that. But I got a fairly bad LSAT score in college and I needed to pivot,
Okay.
which I think is for the best. But I explored a couple of career options before landing on design and really falling in love with it. And as I've kind of evolved my practice and what I do, I think um, I just have always had that intrinsic desire to help and make it somehow a little bit more impactful than just a job. So I think that has kind of shaped me, and I've been able to find out, I love accessibility, I love ethical things, and I love figuring out how design can actually make a difference there.
Awesome. I love to hear that. I love that. If you could point to maybe like one thing or one person, who or what would be your inspiration when it comes to design?
Hmm. I For inspiration, I like to look at products that are live and out there. We have the different boards that you can view designs and mock-ups, but I think exploring actual products and seeing what they're doing, are they doing something new? Is there something that just makes me think of something I could do a little bit different and better? So I have, in the past gone into the App Store. I like to kind of just go through the App Store and look at apps that get great reviews or maybe are a little bit similar to what I'm doing and really explore what that journey is. And there's a website called Mobbin that has
Mm-hmm.
screens from real applications, and they're always adding more. But I think that is super helpful too if you need to kind of start from something you don't want to start from scratch, and you should be observing those patterns, so it kind of helps you see those and look at a variety of them for your own research. So I really like doing that, and as well as just real life things. I think as a designer, we probably all are constantly inspired, or we see something in the real world. We're like, oh my gosh, that's a great design, whether it's physical or digital. So
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. Do you have like a your own personal little swipe file, or do you store any of these in any specific place? Like what's your process like when it comes to finding something that you do like out in the wild?
yeah, I will bookmark or save it to Notion, something like that. And
Mm.
then also, depending on where I am, like the App Store, I'm going to take a lot of screenshots, kind of save those later. If I'm on a site like Mobbin, saving that to your account, kind of creating, oh, these are the checkout flows I'm really excited about, or these are the
Mm.
landing pages that I'm really excited about, and definitely saving them, like you said, because you don't know when you're going to need them, and it might be way down the line.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're going to transition now into a little segment that I like to call overrated or underrated. So I'm going to throw at you a few different terms, some fonts, some design processes, if you will, and you can tell me if you think they're overrated or underrated.
Okay.
So the first three, we're going to start off with some fonts. The first font is Inter. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated. It's really good across digital experiences, and it works well, plays well. I think it looks nice. So I think that one is one that can be leveraged a lot in design.
I love that. The next one is Helvetica.
I'm going to say overrated just because I think the story with Helvetica has come with us today, and people kind of see that as a great font and can be used for anything, which it can, but sometimes you're kind of missing some of the personality if you don't,
Mm.
do that and pair it with something else, or kind of explore some different treatments.
Awesome. Okay, I like that. I like that. And the last one is Papyrus. Overrated or underrated?
I'm going to say overrated. I know we all joke about it, and it used an avatar and all that, but it's become such a joke that it still exists. People probably use it for something that's relevant, but I don't think it deserves quite the hate we've given it. It was designed for a purpose. So
There you go. All right, we got to give some more respect to Papyrus. I like the that's been sort of a common theme too. I think it was Taylor Cashin. We were on the interview and he was like, it gets so much shit, but it has a very specific purpose. When it's used correctly, it's a great
right.
font.
Yeah,
So
I don't think I ever use it, but I don't think it needs to be banned from all font.
there you go. There you go. Justice for Papyrus. That is our if anybody takes one thing from these interviews, it's that Papyrus needs some more respect. Awesome. So the next few are design practices, if you will. Design systems, overrated or underrated?
Underrated. I think design systems are super important, super helpful. And it makes design better, it makes development better. And I think a lot of people or teams are, seeing the value of a design system, but it's sort of like, we'll get to that when we can,
Mm.
it's in progress, or they think that something like a library or, UI kit is the design system.
Yes.
I think that kind of could really be valued more, and really understanding what that means, that it's, coded and really embedded within your organization.
Awesome. I love to see it. Naming your layers, overrated or underrated?
Very underrated. I think I'm guilty of it too a lot of the times, but I think everybody should really, really try to name their layers, and it doesn't have to follow a specific format necessarily. I have been on teams where I can align a little bit of my naming to what the developers are using or
Mm.
what's going to be easy for them. So I think that's a really important thing to do and be cognizant of. And if you're just playing around in your personal file, fine. But I think if you're handing this over to somebody, you want them to be easily able to see it and distinguish what they need to do.
I love it. I love it. That's our big thing here at Zeppelin is like anything to make that process easier between design to dev. And I think that's just one of those little like housekeeping things. I think, like you said,
It
that's
is.
often overlooked that can really make a big difference.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, it can be tedious. So if you forget to do it and you go back the next week and you're looking at all your layers, best practice, start from the beginning and name it. But I know that's easier said than done.
yes. That's a great way to put it is get the what's that quote, like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is today. Like you get started,
Absolutely.
come on, let's do it. Awesome. And then two more for you. Skeuomorphism, overrated or underrated?
I think it's underrated. I think we had a phase where it was sort of everywhere. And I think people maybe got a little bit tired of it. But if you are using that effectively, it doesn't have to be boring. You can show some really great things and really good representations of, real world objects. And I think it's kind of cool that, if you think back to like the trash can icon on Mac or something, like
Yes.
that stuck around. We all know what it is. It's very easily identifiable. So I think it really has its place and it can be good.
Awesome. Okay. I love to hear it. And then the last one for you is flat design. Overrated or underrated?
Um, a little overrated, maybe. I love the look of it. I think it's pretty and can do some really aesthetically pleasing things with it and make an interface that is, really visually nice to look at. I do think that sometimes you are limited on how much detail you can show
Hmm.
if you just do flat design. So I think, having almost a middle ground and kind of incorporating some of those properties with something that can show a little bit more detail is good.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you very much. That was your answers were all very well thought out and like you came with them very quickly. So I appreciate that. That's a skill I feel like so many of us could learn to have. That's your legal background coming in. You're very efficient. I love it. Cool, cool. Well, I'd like to transition now into a little bit more of learning about who you are in terms of your process when it comes to designing and sort of
Mhm.
collaborating with other folks too. So just the first question for you here is how is your relationship with developers that you work with, and are there any areas for improvement that you've seen?
Yeah, I really prioritize the relationship with developers, whatever project I'm working on. And the relationship is always going to, be a little bit different or, uh, be more ideal for you in one situation versus another. But I think I've really made a point to meet with developers early on, understand what they're doing and what their goals are, and how they're working. Because I think if you don't do that, design and development can kind of, go off in two different ways and it's very hard to align again.
Mhm.
So at a lot of companies, I've created or set up office hours really just for development. So, every week I'll just have some open time where they can come and we can chat about, something that they're having trouble implementing or something that I need, is this going to be feasible? So I think it's important to have that relationship. And as far as what could be improved, I think there are always ways to improve. Like we just talked about naming layers. I'm guilty of not
Mhm.
always doing that, but I think it's important to do that and at least have it top of mind and talk to your developers and kind of figure out what might make sense. Is there a way to name this so it ties into the design system if there is one
Mm.
coded?
Mhm.
Things like that.
I love that. I love the sort of you kind of like proactively reaching over into development, being like, how can I adopt some of what
You
you
have
have
to.
to
Yeah.
make our work easier? So I love
Yeah.
that, reaching across the aisle, figuring out how to work better
Yeah. One of
together.
my, someone I used to work with was a great mentor of mine, told me a long time ago when I first started that as a designer and specifically UI designer, your client is not really the user, it's the developer. So you need to get everything to them and make it easy for them to create what you're envisioning. I think a lot of people talk about feasibility when you hear about development, and that can be sort of boring or it's getting in design's way. But really, it's kind of one of the building blocks of the entire product. So you have to work hand in hand and be aligned there.
Definitely. I love that. That it's so interesting that you say that too, because that was one of I'm remembering our one of our co-founders post Palin. She started off the post and it was like designers, remember your first user is a developer. So
Yeah.
like we have to work and keep them in mind when we're doing everything too to
You have to
facilitate.
empathize with them just like you would your other users and really see
Yes.
where they're coming from and build something together.
I love it. I love it. Fantastic. Couldn't have said it better ourselves. So thank you. Um, the next question for you, sort of like looking forward, what does the future of going from design to dev look like, in your opinion?
I think it's going to keep getting more and more aligned and sort of collaborative. Like you see things like Zeppelin that allows you to kind of share all that with developers and get that view, as well as Figma, where you have the developer mode and they can kind of be in there with you working. I think there are a lot of other opportunities out there and maybe more like real time of, we can see the development at the same time that the design and kind of, better evaluate. I think there have been, really good improvements in the past few years. And I think it's going to keep going that way as people see, oh, this makes the process a lot easier if we're all on the same page and can look at the same thing.
I love that. Follow-up question to that one. Do you think that designers need to learn how to code?
I do not think they need to learn how to code, but I do think designers need to learn how to speak developer. So I think it's critical that if you are in a project working with a developer, you understand sort of where they're coming from, you know how to communicate with them. So if you guys are looking at a design together, um, being able to kind of shift that context and talk about, okay, well, these pixels, these ratios, the setup, things like that. I think it's learning how to code. I think that is pushed a lot and it would be great. Like I took a front end web development course years ago and I just don't remember a lot of it, but just knowing the syntax, knowing how things work is really helpful for that. And I know even getting into some of those tools, there are a ton of no code tools out there, but I used to tell my students to explore Webflow if they were really serious about kind of
Mm-hmm.
understanding the tie, just because it gives you so much more insight into flex boxes, layouts, all that stuff, and than you would in something like Squarespace. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love that. A sort of follow up even further to that, to piggyback, we're sort of like 10 layers down in Inception for this question now, but what do you think of AI in the field of design and development? Like, what do you think it's going to do? Do you have any predictions for that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I really like exploring with AI, like all the tools. I've played with a lot of them. I do use ChatGPT regularly just to kind of brainstorm ideas or organize content. I think as far as design goes, it has uh, limited help right now.
Mhm.
I've experimented with some of the tools and not ever gotten an interface or starting point that's exactly what I wanted. If you look at user research with that, you always have to go back, and it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't quite understand the context of what we do as designers. And I
Mm-hmm.
know even over the past couple of years, I've asked ChatGPT things about UX design, product design, and it frequently would get that confused with other fields, so it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't. I knew more than it did whenever I was talking to it. So I think
Sure.
a lot of room to grow. I don't think it's impossible, but I think right now design, as we're kind of seeing, that's the value that we're having as designers, that human aspect and really being able to think and talk with our users. Um, I think there could definitely be some improvements to how it does visual generation and stuff like that. But I think since we are not technically creating art, there are some requirements we have to do with design to really nail it. It's not so imaginative as just mid journey pop out an image.
Yes. I love it. Awesome. Very cool. That it's interesting. A lot of the answers that we've received so far have been sort of along the lines of, I'm excited to see how it develops. I think it'll be a great tool or a great asset for folks. I think, it'll eventually hopefully evolve to be able to catch maybe some accessibility guidelines or comb through your
Yeah,
designs and figure that out too. So we'll
totally.
see. We'll see
Yeah.
about that. But I'm excited to
I
get
love
into the
using
access.
it in my process, but it's definitely just like one part of it. And you always have to
Yes.
go back and really make sure you are cognizant of what it's doing and what you need. So it's another tool in your toolkit.
Yes, and always be careful because it can hallucinate. That's always like the biggest thing. 'Cause I'm always like, you can't take what it says as 100% truth. You always have to make sure
Absolutely.
that you're that you're going one layer deeper. Awesome. Well, cool. I'm excited to dig into the accessibility topic with you because of your,
Yeah.
you had mentioned earlier too, you're doing a lot of work with ethical design, and the work that you were doing with Stigma was a lot of accessibility thinking in design too.
Mhm.
So I'd like to start off with just like the first question of what are the biggest accessibility mistakes that you've seen, and maybe how are some ways that folks can avoid those?
Yeah, great question. I uh, really, the accessibility concerns, I think there are a couple from the design side that I see over and over and over again. And the top one is going to be color contrast. And I know that is kind of the first thing people think about a lot of times when think about accessibility, but um, I see over and over again people learn it and they forget it, or they forget to really do it from the beginning and not go back afterwards and do it because
Mm,
you miss a lot.
mhm,
So with that one, it's learn those contrasts, kind of know in your head what's going to go, what's not going to go, and use a tool. I have a contrast checker. There are ones that go into Figma too and kind of help check that for you. And again, it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes you might have to, use your own thinking, kind of say, okay. But I think that's a big one. I think another one is font size. Uh,
mm. Okay.
I work with new designers a lot who make their font way too small, especially on mobile. Because if you're designing on this screen, you haven't quite gotten into the hang of what it will look like, on the actual device. So
Yeah.
I think being able to use the prototyping tools or seeing what your design is on your phone, that's actually really helpful so you can see the size. And time and time again, I'll see people that maybe are just doing like 10-point font to fit something in,
Hmm.
but it's one of those limitations where we really have to prioritize and not let that go. People will not be able to see that it does not meet guidelines. um, and then, oh, I guess the other one is designing charts and graphs. So this one is important. And I think I'm seeing it done better lately. But if you design a chart or a graph and you have a lot of colors, but somebody's colorblind looking at it, how do
Mm.
they know what the data is? How do they know what this bar is versus that one?
Yeah.
So I think for that, when you're designing something that's data forward and you're using colors, you have to do something else like a pattern or labels, something to really help
Mm.
people have that
Hmm.
second cue of what that thing is.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that because just last week, our guest Mark, he mentioned that he does have a form of color blindness, and he was like, I look at charts all the time, and I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
what like this bar versus this bar, and the color maps, the guides don't really help out too. So that's really interesting that you mentioned that because I feel like that's often an overlooked one. But
It is, yeah. And I think a lot of times if you're designing graphs or charts, you might be just using something that's already out there, or you might be really focusing on that layout, the colors, and making it clear to you. But you have to bring that other side of it, that just using colors and something like that is not going to be
yeah.
accessible.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's it's great to think about. And I hope that, with more visibility to accessibility, it becomes like more widely accepted with
Yeah.
everybody, more used, more all of the things. So I love that. And one of the pieces too that we've talked about before specifically has been like accessibility thinking in design. If you could explain that to somebody who has no concept of that or who hasn't heard of it before, how would you explain it to them in order for them to understand it?
Yeah, so accessibility, there are a lot of guidelines out there, WCAG, about what you need to reach in order to be compliant. So that might be a certain level of contrast, it might be a certain font size, it might be things on the implementation side where you're using proper tags. There are all these, really technical ways that you can meet it. But
Mhm.
when we think about accessible design, and how I like to think about it, is really going and following that mantra of its, design accessibly beyond compliance. So yeah, you want to hit those initial uh, data points that you want to make sure you're not going to get legal ramifications. But if you are designing accessibly and you're doing it intentionally, you are really enhancing your UX practice and empathizing with users even more. It's sort of
Mhm.
that there's a Microsoft accessibility infographic out there that kind of says, this somebody might be disabled permanently. They might, just have a broken arm or something might
Mhm.
have happened to them. And then something might be situational, just like their hands are full. So when we look at that, there are all these different people that need access and need to be able to understand and experience our designs. And, if we accommodate them and really focus on what they need, empathizing with those users, it's only going to help everybody else. It's not going to be a detriment to anybody. It's going to be, uh, an improvement. It's going to set up your site for success or your app for success. So I think designing accessibly, it's, understanding what those guidelines are, but then integrating that when you are doing discovery or talking with your users and really figuring out, okay, is this what they need? Is there an issue here? How else can I explore this to make it accessible for them?
Yeah.
And I guess the last point is just, I feel like accessibility, sometimes you hear that we don't have time to kind of focus on that now. We'll come back to it, or it's really expensive to invest in that. But I think it's really, really important from at least the design side to think about that from the very beginning, because it's kind of like the naming the layers thing. You don't want to go back and
Mhm.
try to make everything accessible after it's already done.
Yeah, I love that. The is like the main lesson I feel like to take away from here is start early, earlier than you think. Start
Yeah,
at the as soon as you possibly can. Make sure that this is sort of baked into your entire strategy moving forward.
totally.
And I love that. I think, like you said, it'll just make everything better. It makes every experience better. It's designing for every single possible user that you might have, and I hope to anybody listening out there, like you understand too that every person that uses your app needs to be able to use it fully. And so try to think of that in the beginning. So I love that. Thank you very much. That was
Mhm.
that was fantastic. I see a like a brand in your future of like the accessibility designer, or something like you have just such a really wonderful way of talking about it that I think will help a lot of people really understand that. So
Thank you.
thank you very much
Yeah,
for imparting on us all of your wisdom when it comes to
of course.
accessibility and design
My
thinking.
pleasure.
I love that. So that wraps up our little interview section here. I've got a few rapid fire questions, then we have a fun little game to finish off our talk here today.
Okay.
So the first few questions here, I've just got four for you. You can take a second or two to think about them if you'd like.
Okay.
The very first one here is, if you had to guess, how many rectangles have designers created?
Ever in the history of designers?
Yes, yes. That is always the first question that everybody has asked thus far. Is like, ever? Yes.
I mean, I millions, billions. I don't even like too many to count, I think.
Price is Right style. If you had to pick like one number on the scale of all numbers, what would your number be?
950 million. Not accurate at all.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. I remember somebody else was like, doesn't everything start as a rectangle? And I was like, I think you're onto something.
Oh,
That's good. We've had answers, I think, all the way from a few million all the way to like a gazillion or
oh, wow.
like the infinity. So
I mean, that might be closer to the truth, honestly. There's so many rectangles.
I love it. I love it. If you could describe your design to dev process in just 3 words, what would those words be?
Hmm. Collaborative, transparent, and I don't know if this is right, but understanding. So getting that
Mm,
alignment and really, understanding each other. I think
yeah.
that's part of it. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. If you could describe your design process in just 1 word, what would that word be?
Design process. Intentional.
Mm, I love that. I love that. And my final question for you here now is, if you could describe yourself in just 1 word, what would
Hmm.
that word be?
That's tricky. Let's do curious.
I love that. I love it. It was funny. I asked that question one time to my internal crew at like the start of one of our little like crew meetings together, and the responses that I thought were going to be like, "Oh, so fun. Let me think about," but they were like, "This is the most existential question I've ever heard. I need like a month to think about this. What's going on? Why did you
Yeah.
ask us this?"
If I'm being
Uh,
honest, it's like one word for me is overwhelmed. We could just, every day.
There you go. It encompasses a lot. I think like for mine, I chose like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious because I was just like, it makes you think. It's out there. It technically counts because it's all 1 word. It's like the longest words. People remember it. So I very much
Good
went
one.
for the for like a vain response, but
Yeah,
who
that's
knows?
good.
You know. Awesome. Well, we've come to what is my favorite segment of the show, which I like to call "So You Think You're a Designer," and where we ask our esteemed guests to recreate our Zeppelin logo using a browser-based Microsoft Paint called jspaint.app. So if you would, feel free to share your screen and we can follow along with you. You have exactly 2 minutes to do so.
There's
And
not much time.
that is it's like that. Did you ever remember those shows like Minute to Win It, where they had to do all those like crazy games, and like they were like, oh, you have to get as many ping pong balls and catch them in this thing as in a minute. So it reminds
Yes.
me of that. There's like a
Okay.
lot of
That makes me definitely put at ease for it. Thank you.
no, there is no pressure at all. I'm really excited to see.
Okay.
Um, let's see. Perfect. And we can see. So as soon as you start, as soon as your virtual pen hits the screen, we'll start the clock, and feel free to talk us through your process and let us know what you're doing.
Okay. I can see the Zeppelin logo. I don't know if everyone else can, but I'm gonna start with I don't know Paint's capabilities, so I'm gonna do this guy first. Because it looks like it's underneath.
Ooh.
Can't believe this is 2 minutes.
I love this. This looks good. That's a fantastic tail feather.
Oh, I don't
I
want
think
to. Okay.
that's what it's called.
Then we're gonna do. Want to do the body. Let's see if I can.
Ooh.
Mm,
I like the use of the shapes.
Oh, thank you.
Ooh.
Then I'm gonna put this down the middle of it. Okay, now how much time do I have?
You have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, I will go get better colors if we have time.
Love it.
Mm.
Ooh. The paint fill tool. The paint fill tool can either be the best thing you've ever used or it can completely mess up everything.
No.
Oh, this looks good. This is good.
I'm gonna have to get some more colors on it. Hold on. I don't have time. I don't have time.
Oh, good. You've got about 30 seconds left.
Oh no. Oh no, that is so wrong. Okay.
This is looking very good. This is really, really, I'm very impressed with this. This is amazing.
Okay, let me get these in.
All right. 10 more seconds. Ooh, I love the technique. Oh my gosh. I'm like so impressed. You get an extra 10 seconds for that.
I love your reaction.
It's like, wow, that is a fantastic use of that. I didn't even know you could like curve them like that.
That's not right. But
and you are at time. This is beautiful. This is fantastic. I am like really impressed with how quickly you were able to connect all the dots and make the shapes all great. This is fantastic.
Thank you. This is a very challenging tool to use. It's design. Having was about 5.
I was just about to say, I was like, my next question to everybody is always, if you had to do all of your design work for the rest of the week using paint, could you do it?
No, I would be losing my mind. There's no way.
All right, no worries. Well, it's a good thing that other design tools have prevailed since paint, and we no longer have to use it. So, well, that brings us to the very end here, Becky. I wanted to thank you so much again for your time. This was a fantastic conversation. I hope any folks that have any questions about accessibility and design, accessibility thinking, will reach out to you and check out Speck Studio too. So if there's anything else you'd like to say, any last moments or anything that you'd like to plug to, if you're starting up, if you're releasing a book, if you're doing anything, now's your chance. But thank you again.
Yeah, no, just thank you. This has been great. Love chatting with you as always. And this has been fun. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, be sure to check in with us every Wednesday for new interviews with folks who build and design beautiful products. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you all next week. Take care. See ya.